In 2011, Sony Ericsson announced one of the most ahead-of-the-curve phones ever in its Xperia Play. And over 13 years later, there is still a devout group of people whose mission is to keep this thing alive. There's a Discord, spreadsheet, heaps of files. This is not what I expected when buying one of these for a retrospective, and I'm super excited to share my experience with you all. But before that, guys, I'm really trying to hit 100,000 subscribers, and we're agonizingly close now. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that button, genuinely, it would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much. Right, let's just dive straight into this thing. It actually took me ages to find a copy of the Xperia Play on eBay here in the UK, so I resorted to CEX of all places, and I paid just shy of £100 for my unit, which, to be fair, is in pretty good condition considering it's over a decade old at this point. I loaded it up for the first time, set it all up, and then realised that none of the games worked. None of the pre-installed Sony games worked on this thing, because they all relied on the original online servers, which are all gone at this point. I did a quick Google search, which led me to a subreddit, which then led me to a Discord and heaps of files and tutorials. Look, I'm not going to teach you how to sort of fix all of this stuff in this video. I'm not actually going to link to anything. I'll just say that if you want to get your Xperia Play up and running again, it's just a quick Google search away. There are lots of materials out there. The subreddit is a very good place to go. The hardware itself is decidedly early 2010s. It's pretty much entirely plastic, though it does feel really nice and dense. Most high-end phones dwarf it these days in terms of screen size. This is a mighty 4-inch LCD, 480p in resolution, with some fat bezels. But despite its diminutive size, it feels really nice in the hand, both in normal mode and in gaming mode. My unit runs Android 2.3.4. Yep, gingerbread, this bad boy is old. And navigating the software, it certainly feels like it. But despite this, there is a dedicated online community who work on trying to keep the Xperia Play running and playing those games that we have all lost due to the side effects of always online DRM. The fact that you could buy this phone back in the day and a few years later lose most of what made it really cool is just not right in my opinion. The community has restored many of the older titles available and made them playable without those first-party Sony servers. Having tried some of my absolute favourites on here, natively on the hardware, I have to say this is a really good experience. It's not like a gaming phone where you'd feel like it's a phone first and then a bit of a gaming device second. This almost feels like a dedicated handheld gaming console, and with a phone strapped to it, I suppose. I wouldn't be surprised if someone bought one of these things just to have as a little compact handheld, maybe hacked it to play emulated games or something like that. It is wonderful. It's funny because we have had some high-end gaming phones down the years, expensive ones too, but with some absolutely glaring issues. One of those mainly being the controls, and the fact they just suck on a touchscreen. It's insane that gaming phones are still made this way, yet Sony had it right over a decade ago. The slide-out controller concept is so simple and yet incredibly effective. It almost seems stupidly simple. Of course, with the phone being considerably smaller than modern smartphones, which was simply the trend at the time, it means the ergonomics aren't perfect for big adult hands. Mine are small to medium and they kind of fit about right, but yeah, anyone with big old mitts isn't going to be playing this comfortably. Even the triggers feel surprisingly nice, like very tactile, better than what I have on my PSP Go, PSP or Vita. The main letdown here is actually the thumbstick setup, which are just capacitive pads and not actual sticks. Either way, the controls do work great for controlling these games on mobile, way better with that tactile hardware feedback than you'd ever experience on a touchscreen. The gaming experience is pretty decent. I tried out a handful of wonderful titles like the original Crash Bandicoot, Crazy Taxi and Ridge Racer R4, and I had a lot of fun gaming just to write and create this video. The games don't run super fast, but they do run quick enough that if you go into it with relatively low expectations, you should be still quite pleased. They feel like they're playing at about 30 FPS, which to be fair was probably the mobile standard back in 2011, 2012. And of course it's well below the standards in 2024, but come on, we've moved on since. And I have felt a slight delay from hitting the control buttons to what actually happens on the screen of this thing, which can be particularly tricky in like platformers, but I don't hate it because, it's a 13-year-old smartphone. It almost feels like it's cheating death in the first place, let alone giving me an amazing experience. Admittedly, this is also probably because of the low frame rate and less so about the actual hardware input lag. I think one of the other massive factors going against the Xperia Play is that its panel doesn't get nearly as bright as others. Smartphones these days are crazy bright. So mostly gaming in sort of medium lit environments, which is mostly just indoors, and it limits how much you can actually play the Play. Oh yeah, and the battery life isn't great either. I mean, thankfully you can just pop that back off and then swap the battery out with whatever you want, bring spares with you. And these really aren't the biggest batteries in the first place, about 1500 milliamp hours, it's kind of crazy. Speaking of specs, this phone has 512MB of RAM and even less storage, 400MB. My model didn't actually let me download anything with the browser unless I had a microSD card in it, so if and when you do decide you want games on this thing, a memory card is an absolute requirement. Me and my partner were shocked at just how good the speakers were on this thing. Like, they aren't front firing and, there's no obvious cutouts for them really, and yet they sounded really clear and really full actually, way fuller than I was expecting. Old mobile speakers, even front firing ones, were known for being pretty tinny and lacking that fullness, and modern phones have good speakers mostly due to crazy sort of intense DSP work and less to do with the actual drivers themselves, but given this doesn't seem to have either of those things, it seems wild that they're just so good. Oh look, and a headphone port as well, just in case you don't want to play out loud. Did you know that the Xperia Play's Wikipedia page lists the PSP Go as the Play's predecessor? They're not quite the same kind of product, but their similarities are hard to brush off. The Play feels tighter, better put together, has a significantly sharper display too, though at double the price of the PSP Go, I suppose that's not massively surprising. Funnily enough, the Go feels far worse in the hands than the Xperia Play, almost like a toy by comparison, which is something I just wasn't expecting. Of course, the Go, unlike the regular PSP or even the Vita, doesn't let you install games physically, you have to load them up via the store, which is no longer available. Similarly to the Xperia Play, the PSP Go owners have found ways to load up their games without needing the first party servers available, which is fantastic, keeping the old stuff going for longer. And the Sony handhelds are kind of mental in general, so I have pretty much all of them here. Let me know in the comments if you want more content on the PlayStation handhelds, because they're kind of remarkable. I wish all gaming phones were like this, a slide out set of controls, a high res screen, some surprisingly good speakers, and all for about the same price as the standard flagships of the time, maybe a little bit more expensive. And with how thin we can get OLED panels, our efficient processors and so on, I'm sure that someone could make one of these about the size of an S24 Ultra and it would just sell out instantly. The handheld gaming craze right now is insane, so I would not be surprised if someone made a modern version of this and it just sold out before it even released. I always wanted to try out an Xperia Play. It was one of the most innovative and downright awesome smartphones we'll ever see. It's highly unlikely we'll see another big phone maker create something like this, but if we did, it would go down a treat. I am so glad I was able to get my hands on one and try it out how it was always meant to be played. It's an example of DRM making products obsolete on purpose, and I love that there are talented, dedicated, and innovative people out there fighting the good fight and keeping this stuff going. The Xperia Play feels like a long lost piece of technology history, but held up by a few enthusiasts. It's still alive and kicking. Take notes, ROG. This is how you make a gaming phone.